Boom. We're live. What's up? Let's see. Oh, let me get the music started. Let's not do that. Boom. We're live. What's up? Cool. Audio's working. That's cool. Let's tone this way down. And then let's get started. All right. So, we are in week 4. So, we're going to be getting into materials and rendering today, right? Last week we were working on lighting and mood and just kind of setting up our like kind of tone and just understanding of what the space is supposed to look and feel like, you know? Now we're kind of refining one step deeper, going into materials and rendering, right? So for those that have been following along, this is the painting that we've been doing for the last couple weeks. We had a grayscale block out, right? Kind of like this, and then we started getting the color and tone and understanding of the space there. Now we have something that's like kind of okay. It's not really quite there yet, but we want to do a lot of material render. This is kind of where the painting really takes form and we start kind of breaking things down and understanding like how all this comes together really well, right? So with that in mind, I guess we'll talk about what I did real quick. So I think I didn't really do too much from the last stream because the last stream was mostly about like just getting that grayscale into color. We just lassoed out the shapes and started colorizing, adding the color balance colors versus doing the colorizing it with the hue shift or the hue saturation settings, just because we want to add color to it because it's already kind of like we set up the tone and hue where it's like this kind of yellowish kind of light, warm yellowish light, and we want all the colors to kind of match within that. Right now we want to actually start painting. I started painting just a little bit like right before before the stream started. I just kind of did that front counter area so I wouldn't have to do it during stream. It's pretty boring, so it's just like whatever. We're gonna focus on some of the more the critical kind of things in the scene, and get that looking good while we're like today, right? So let's see here. Let's get to it. So something to understand about 3D as a whole, right? Something that everyone should probably be aware of, right? If you're not really used to doing 3D, like if you're not a lighting artist and a material artist and various things like that, right? When it comes to actually using 3D, chances are it's probably wrong the way you're going about it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like, generally speaking, there's this trust that we give 3D that really, I would honestly say, is like misplaced oftentimes. You know what I'm saying? Because like whenever we're working on 3D, we're like, oh, okay, the perspective's good, so you don't really put a grid up, and then you're like, well, the color, the color materials and stuff, I assign that in Blender, so it's like I don't really need to worry about that too much, so on and so forth, right? You get this whole chain reaction of like, you did it in 3D, so you don't need to worry about it later, right? Because it's 3D. Why wouldn't that be good, right? And so what I want to explain here is that even though I left a gray box so people can kind of follow along. But for those of you like painting or like painting on a material and lit 3D scene, you want to really make sure that you're pushing that painting far, right? Like if you're not used to doing 3D, it can oftentimes feel like, what do I even do here? You know what I mean? Like if it spits out something like this, you're like, everything's very well defined, right? More often than not, it's not really the way you want things to look. And the reason for that is because your lighting skills when it comes to lighting a scene in 3D, right? And then your material understanding and all those things, right? Usually isn't up to par compared to like an actual 3D artist that's supposed to be doing that, right? Because that's a whole other skill. That's a whole different like avenue of learning that you should, you would need to go down to be able to trust it right out of 3D, right? And so I usually find this issue where when you see your, when you see your designs, and you start painting, oftentimes people don't know where to paint just because they're like, I did it in 3D, so it's fine. It's already, I already have everything that I need to kind of paint, and you just kind of add some brush strokes just to make it look looser, essentially, right? But understand that if you're not a 3D artist, if you're not somebody that really is tied into that world, you're probably missing a lot that makes it feel very like, has that 3D kind of feel to it, right? So for me here, what I did was I I grabbed this entire like table section here, right? And I just repainted it, right? It's all of it is completely new. I just filled it with a solid color and then I painted on top. Really nothing crazy, but you see how it just pops a little bit more. There's something about it, I like, me personally, I have a better material understanding when it comes to painting, right? It's not that you can't do it in 3D. It's just more often than not, you don't have that skill because you never really worked on it, right? So just things to keep in mind. We're gonna be doing the same thing with our chef robot here. I'm gonna be kind of focusing in that area slash maybe that kind of top darker part of the counter, right? But that's the kind of idea, right? Don't trust that that the 3D is gonna do it for you. That's how you end up with 3D that really feels very stiff, and the painting doesn't end up looking that good. You know what I'm saying? And then on top of all of that, right? You lose that personality in a world where when we're designing, right, we're like, we're trying to stand out, we're trying to be someone unique, we're trying to be an artist that has a viewpoint or an understanding that you're trying to contribute to a style or a look or a feel, right? And if everybody looks like they are doing 3D work, right, it's really hard to stand out that way. You know what I'm saying? Not that you can't, but more often than not, you won't, right? So, so cool. All right, so let's dive into this. So I'm gonna start with my center chef guy. Something I would recommend, right? Because we're kind of it's in this weird point where with the 3D, right? It's kind of in this spot of like, it's kind of okay. Really, it might feel like you might not need to do much, but like you're kind of in this spot of like, it's kind of okay, but you're kind of measuring things off of each other. And something that I've noticed a lot is that like, when people hand me 3D work, right, and they're like, oh hey, this is my portfolio or whatever, this is the highest level of detail, right, where it's like, this is a perfect 3D model, you have all your reflections, you have all the things happening, so on and so forth, right? And what happens is when you look at this, you're like, okay, decently rendered, the materials look okay, right, or whatever, the basic values look okay, right? And then you compare this guy to that thing, and then you compare that thing to this thing, and this thing to that thing, right? I already painted this, so we're ignoring that. But like, you have this comparison game where you're constantly comparing things left and right. That's how art works, right? The reason something feels unfinished, because in comparison to the thing next to it, it's not the same fidelity, right? Right now, everything's in the same fidelity, so it feels more finished than it really is. But the second you start painting and actually defining what that like look and finish actually is when it comes to paint, that's when you'll start seeing how far away the 3D model is. In my opinion, right, this 3D model is maybe like 60% of a full painting, right? It's like, there's still a ton of painting to do, like a metric ton that I could spend a month on this painting and still not be done, right? But if you asked me this maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's pretty close to done, right? Because that skill set, that rendering skill set might not have been there quite yet. Maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, let's push that a little further. But like, it's the whole point is, once you're able to understand how to actually fully paint something, you can see how far away a lot of this stuff really is, right? So I'm going to start in my focal points. When we start painting, I do highly recommend start in your focal point areas and your foreground areas. If you can paint, this spot and this spot, this kind of area, at a very high level, Everything else is going to fall into place. A lot of this stuff, not that it doesn't matter, it's just kind of like whatever right now, right? We'll get there when we get there. But overall, it's like, it's a lot of side stuff, and your peripherals will kind of like fill that out for you. You know what I'm saying? But start in your focal points, branch out, right? So, and we'll talk about more of why we want to do that later. But let's check this out. So we got my guy here, right? And something I want to hit home with for everybody is that even though I put a 3D light in this scene, right? It's that top panel thing's a light, and there's like other lights making things look lit, right? Even though I did that, right now, I just want you to realize that you don't want to let that define what you're painting, right? Something that happens a lot, just like I was saying earlier, right? With like the materials and everything. Lighting, it does the same thing, where if you trust the 3D too much, you lose the opportunity to actually make something interesting, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, logically this, you know, this works or whatever, right? Because there's a with the 3D, it's following the physics of whatever's happening in the scene, right? Like it's just doing, it's calculating it out and it's doing it. But what I will say is, you know, really try not to trust that, because once you actually start painting it, you'll realize that you can see better than you can actually like 3D, right? Like if your 3D lighting skills aren't there, your lighting material and all that, it's not going to look as good. Right now, it feels kind of flat. It doesn't really hit that hard for me, and it's not really hitting the tone that I'm looking for, right? And it's not defining the forms that I want to define. So I'm going to be designing that to help my image look better. But if I just trust the 3D, generally speaking, it won't look good, right? It won't look amazing unless you're really good at lighting, and in which case you're kind of shifting jobs at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like you're kind of like you're moving into almost a different category. You know, it's like when you start UV unwrapping in 3D, it's just like, yeah, you're probably going a little too far. You know what I'm saying? So, all right. If I sound kind of weird, I was sick this past week, so I'm like chewing on lozenges and various things like that. And I'm actually about to get one right now. All right, let's get this. So, starting with the focal point, I'm gonna start with the head. I have like everything kind of layered out here. Decently okay, right? You know, the whole chef guy, he's on his own layer, and then every piece that I need from him is on his own layer. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start kind of separating this out into a couple different pieces. Whenever you start painting, right, your materials and all those things, what I want you to do, we talked about this a little bit when it came to that one coffee shop building call out I did. I think it was like August or something like that. But when I started doing that, right, you know, I need my layers to kind of be doing a certain thing, right? Like there needs to be something happening here. So with that in mind, I'm going to take all my pieces, every main piece that I have, and break them up into my light side and shadow side. This way, whenever I start affecting one side, right, you know, you can control this a little bit better. What happens in 3D, for me at least, is whenever I'm painting and I'm like, maybe I'm like a little bit lazy, right? Maybe I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just like, I'll paint around it. I'll just kind of like, you know, make things so it, you know, I'll just lasso it out once and then I'll call it a day kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not trying to, I'm like being lazy. When I'm being lazy about things, right? More often than not, it really does come to kind of haunt you essentially. So what I would highly recommend is separate out the pieces you need. This way, when you start making these big sweeping changes, right, you can just lock pieces and start painting, and it gets clean. You know what I mean? It takes some discipline to get to do it, and I don't always do it, right? But just understand that the easier you make this painting for yourself, the easier this whole painting is gonna be, right? So I'm just cutting out the pieces that I need. I need more often than not, it's like shadow side and then light side, and then I can kind of like, I can wing the rest from there, you know? And like buttons and stuff, I'll probably do later and all that, but yeah. Oh, we're at the demo phase now. For those that those in the Discord want to kind of talk and ask questions, definitely hit me up. Today's gonna be a little more chill. Material rendering days like this always are a little more chill than usual. I do have some topics I do want to talk about that came up throughout the week and all that. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Oh, look at that. That's cool. That was a cool happy mistake right there. I don't know where this color came from because I was just like extruding. I was using the smudge tool and then it just kind of gave me this cool highlight. So I'm gonna run with it. All right. Boom. See how like just painting things a little more, right? And I'm not even doing that much because the cool part about 3D, right? What I do like a lot about using 3D is that it gives you a really good base to start with, right? It's like, you know, the colors, I'm actually color picking a lot. It's that fidelity, right? It's that like the brush strokes that I'm getting out of this. It's all these like kind of just smaller like dings and just little things that I'm kind of like including, right? Or like just warping in like the plastic or whatever, the metal, and allowing myself to just, you know, kind of create that chaos. I am allowing the paint to kind of, you know, just be a little looser because everything's so tight. You know, you are allowed to be looser, but that doesn't mean go in and just add like brush strokes. I think something something that I've seen a lot, especially like this past round at Lightbox where I was doing a lot of reviews, like portfolio reviews and stuff, is that like you have a lot of 3D artists where they know that it's too tight for whatever it is that they're trying to do, right? Like, you know, just the application of like the modeling and all that, the rendering, it's just very, you know, rendered out. It's just 3D'd out, right? And they know that it's not a very appealing look. So what they do is they take brush strokes and they just go, oh, let me just add some shit in there, and you know what I mean? And what happens is it just looks fake first and foremost, because the reason is, you know, if you're not that good at painting, right, you're gonna do stuff like that. And so generally speaking, you probably don't have the eye to kind of make that work either. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think when you look at artists that are really good at painting or really good at 3D, right? And they're you know, some of the best work that you've seen in the industry essentially for like that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, they know how to paint, right? And so when you see them do it, right? When you see like someone like Aaron Lamonic or somebody do it where they're like, you know, they use a heavy amount of 3D, right? Or someone like Eitan Zana, right? Where they use a ton of 3D, they really know how to paint. And so when they add in those looser strokes, when they kind of do those looser things, it looks really good, right? And it's just because they would have been able to do it regardless of like, you know, whatever program they were using. It wasn't actually the program that made it happen for them, essentially. You know what I mean? And so whenever you're using your 3D and stuff, right, I would highly recommend trying not to just, you know, add in fake strokes, because most good artists, anybody worth their salt, anybody actually looking at your portfolio, right, generally speaking, they can tell. They just know. It's so easy to see it, you know. But I mean, you know, you do what you want to do. You do whatever it is that makes you happy. All right. Boom. Oops, that's not it. That's not what I want.
Sorry, Jimmy. I have something.
What's up, dude?
Like you talk about the brush stroke we add in when we bend. Is there any rule to do that? Like you don't just put some random brush stroke into the bending, right? So it ain't any rule to do it. It's recently.
Yeah, so there are some things that you want to keep in mind when you are trying to add like a more painterly appeal to things, right? Something that happens here, I'm going to do it on top just so we can kind of see it. I'll flatten this down a little bit. Boom. So I duplicated the whole thing, flattened it down. So I can kind of like affect everything at this point, right? I can just smudge whatever. Okay, so there's a couple things that you want to understand. When people say, like, you know, make it feel more painterly, because you have a 3D model and it's rendered out, right? And so you're like, you know, there's this temptation to be like, oh yeah, so I need to throw in a bunch of brush strokes, right? And so you look at this and you're like, cool, let me just like do some of that, you know, and then you add like some of that. And you're like, oh, let me just be a little looser about things. And you're like, oh, and they're like, look at that glow. You know what I'm saying? The issue with this approach, obviously this is really bad, but that's what I see whenever people are doing shit like that, right? The reason it's really bad is because we're actually looking there, right? Our eyes visually get attracted to that spot. Oops. What just happened to my audio? Give me a second. Hold up. My headphones just cut out. Hello? Test, test. All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool, cool.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sweet, sweet. Sorry about that. My headphones like cut out for a second. Anyway, the reason why, like, you know, when we're doing this, there is this tendency to want to show a brushstroke, right? And so you do it in the spot that we're supposed to be looking. But the part about that is we're actually looking there, right? And so you'll start physically seeing that brushstroke. You're just like, you know, your eyes kind of lock onto it. And what I want you to understand is when you're using 3D and you want the feeling of a painted kind of section, what you want to do is you want to show them a clean painting and you want them to feel a loose painting, right? So what does this mean? So I'm actually already doing it, right? In some instances, right? So right now you can actually see it here where, like, obviously this is like 5 minutes worth of work. Half of it was talking shit. So it's like, you know, it's not done yet, but you can already see me rendering, like full on rendering, like highlight, core shadows, bends, warps, you know, rim lights, this and that, right? I'm doing all of that. But then me earlier, I did that stuff. That's not wood texture. That's just trash, right? This is wood texture up top, right? And you see the difference here, right? So I have something happening here where, I mean, it's not like clean wood texture. Let's make that real clear right off the start, right? But it's the indication of wood texture, right? So it's like, it's kind of there. But then right next to it, but in the shadow, light shadow, right? I have my textures just being a little bit looser. So you still feel it. You understand that it's there, right? And then the painterliness starts kicking in. You're not supposed to see it. You're supposed to feel it, right? You don't look at paint strokes. You feel paint strokes. And so when you're painting, whatever your focal point is, right? Keep it clean. Just paint that, you know, the way you need to paint it. Keep it solid. As you get better, you can decide where that line is and isn't, right? But when you start painting, keep your focal points clean. That's the whole thing we're looking at, right? And then as you move away from the focal point, you can get more and more loose, right? So for example, I have my flat layer. Let's say like I was kind of like quote unquote done with this painting, right? And then I do a rough smudge pass. This happens a lot where people are like, dude, I just kind of did a thing where I'm like, dude, I'm just like fucking, you know what I mean? And like, wow, look how painterly that is. It's not good, right? But the whole point being is, if I loosened up this section over here and just kind of like did a little bit of that, kind of smudged some of this area down here, right? And you get kind of like just block out this area. Some of that light kind of gets, you know, smudged out and this and that. And you're kind of just playing with things. You see how when you look at this, it still feels good. And then the sides, they kind of start watering down, right? It's what you're really doing when you have a painterly image is you're simulating the fall off of detail from areas that you're not looking. You know, when you look at something and everything around is kind of blurry, you know, I mean, you know, you look at it, it gets into focus, but like a photograph, you're looking at the thing and the rest is kind of blurry. Those paint strokes are simulating like a noise degradation, right? Just detail degradation. And so when you can, right, do that as a way to blur things, Does that make sense? Right? There's a million ways to do it, right? And the way that I'm explaining now isn't the only way, but it's for me one of the first things I started learning when I was getting to doing more painterly things. Everybody wants the painterly thing to be in the middle, where it's like you're looking at a nice big paint stroke and you're doing these things. Look at all the paintings that you find appealing, right? Or hopefully, hopefully it's from an artist that's like, renowned to be good at that process. You know what I'm saying? There's also a taste issue when it comes to that. Some people are like, oh, I really like this painter. It's like, but it's not actually good type of thing. You know what I'm saying? But find an artist that's like renowned as somebody that does that really well, whether it's like fine art, whether that's like concept art, illustration, whatever, right? And then look at their focal points. Generally speaking, it's a lot cleaner than the rest. And doesn't have to be clean, right? There's this Craig Mullins piece that I often reference. Craig Mullins. I mean, most of his paintings, it'd probably do it pretty well. But where the hell is it? I'm not gonna be able to find it. It's always like, you know exactly where it's at whenever you don't need it, but whenever you need it, it's not there. Oh, where the hell is it? Oh, here it is. Got it, boy. All right, let's do this. Boom, is that it? Yeah, all right. So, painterly, right? Generally speaking. So when we look at this, what you want to understand is everything's like super loose, right? Yeah, you see like hard round strokes, you see like, all sorts of stuff. Whether you like this or not, who knows? But the point is, this man is considered somebody that could do this really well. He's pretty good at his job, to say the least. And so when you look at this, right, everything is like pretty loose, and then there's spots that you want to look at, right? It's the cleanest sections there are. The focal points are the sharpest areas. He actually painted all that shit. You know what I mean? And, there is a looseness to it. Absolutely. But in comparison to the areas around it, those are the tighter places. He cleaned it up in certain spots, right? It's not clean, right? Compared to, our normal standard of what we like, even like what I'm doing in my current painting, right? It's not like tight, but in comparison to the rest, it is the focal point, the spot we're supposed to look at is the cleanest. And so when you're designing your, looseness, right? Design it around your focal point, not as a focal point. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, you explained it really well. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, man. DeHaas says, my question is, when you're implementing storytelling and mood with the lighting of the piece, do you have references for that storytelling you start with for figuring out, or do you just go on vibes and do it based off experience? I have a hard time with storytelling and lighting at times, so I'm not sure what kind of approach works best for this. We're just looking for an approach that's super helpful too. Yeah, so oftentimes, right? Yeah, it's hard. I think whenever you're creating your scenes, right? I'm just gonna keep painting here. whenever you start with your scenes, right? It can be really hard to like, do that, right? Because, it's, I mean, shit's hard, right? And so what I would highly recommend is find references. And, these references, they're generally speaking best from movies, right? And the reason I say that is because movies tend to be a lot better at it than, like, let's say something like games, because, movies and stuff, they focus on that. That's almost their whole existence, right? Is to be able to do these things, do those things, right? And so whenever you're trying to find your references, I think I've done it in multiple streams before. Go to Shot Deck, right? Find references and find movies that you've actually already seen. Don't do movies where it's like, oh, that color looks pretty. It's like it's fine, You'll probably be okay if you did that. But what I will say is the reason why oftentimes people's like mood and tone doesn't look good or doesn't really work that well is because they don't understand what their reference was doing to begin with. You know what I'm saying? Like if you look at a reference, like here, let's see. Oh, I got one. Okay. We know that we know the scene, right? Let's see. Where is it? I need to find the scene where it happens or is about to happen. Here you go. All right. I think this is a crop of said scene, but it is a moment. So, all right. Star Wars. Hopefully most of you have seen this. If you haven't, you're about to get spoiled, but I mean, you're like 5 years, 10 years later, whatever, right? Anyway, so in this scene here, Han Solo's talking to his son, Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo, right? And this is a moment where Han is trying to convince his son to come back to the light side, right? And, you know, it's this touching moment. And, you know, he's like, you know, embracing his son and trying to get him to come back, right? And the tone here, the story point here is a father and son moment, right? If you've seen the movie, Han dies here. He gets stabbed. It's not a good moment, right? It's the tone here is that Kylo does not change, kills his father, you know, cuts off that bond and leaves essentially, right? So the mood and lighting and tone is designed around that moment. That's why it's red, right? Red, Sith. He's not Ben, he's Kylo, right? And so if you didn't know that, and you're like, wow, that's a very touching moment between a father and a son. Let me use that tone for my movie or for my image. It's not going to work, right? Because that lighting design is not the intention of like that, you know, the father and son touching moment that you're trying to paint is not this color palette, because this color palette was a message to, or a tone really saying that it's not working essentially, right? It's not, he's still Kylo. In the scenes before, it's kind of blue and then it flips to red and this is kind of back and forth. The mood and lighting was conveying his Kylo Ren's mental state. Eventually, Red wins over, stabs his dad, and we know he's still a Sith, right? And so that story point is what makes this mood and tone appropriate for what's happening here, right? And so you have to understand that to then incorporate that into your work. So when you just look at like just random color palettes, you're probably gonna be okay, right? You know, if it's like a bright sunny day or it's like a very beautiful sunset or whatever, most of the time you're gonna be okay. But to really design color, you have to understand what's happening in the story, right? Because you're looking at this and you're like, oh yeah, this isn't gonna go well, right? But this isn't gonna go well because of the context of the story, and the lighting's helping you tell that story. So for you, whatever your composition's trying to do, right? Understand, you're like, oh, you know, I want this nice kind of father-son moment between, you know, or mother-daughter moment, right? Between like my characters. And I want to show this lighting. This is not your lighting scenario, right? Look at a movie that you've seen where there is that moment and then copy that one, right? Just to start off, right? As somebody like first getting into color and lighting, you know, color and lighting, surprise, is not just about using every color and putting lights in a scene, right? People that paint with like, you know, every color under the rainbow, I'm sorry, you are not good at color. That's not what color is about, right? It's about understanding how to use color and design it to help tell your story, right? And so when you look at scenes, understand the context and use that context for your story, right? If you can do that, it's going to be a lot better, right? Obviously, you know, I take color palettes all the time that I don't have context for, right? You know, it happens, absolutely. But just start learning what that means, and you'll start getting better at so you'll start getting better at actually doing this better. You know what I'm saying? Same reason why, like, for example, I have my my image here, right? This is my painting that I've been doing. So I'm gonna flatten this. Right now, it has, the yellows are actually a little too yellow, right? The reason for that is because I'm gonna warm this back up. I'm gonna brighten this up just a hair, right? I'm gonna be like, you know, you see how this lighting right here, this is bad, but like this lighting right here probably makes a little more sense for a restaurant like this. It's a little bit warmer, right? It's like a more warmer yellow instead of like a greener yellow, right? And then it's brighter, which makes a little more sense for a more happier restaurant, right? But like we were saying, this isn't a place that is supposed to be like, you know, I'm not trying to create an environment or a scene where it's very happy and it's very like, wow, this is the best place I've ever been. This is supposed to be like a commercialization of a very personal experience, right? Where like, you know, they're like, oh, instead of hiring the actual sushi chef, we can just hire a bunch of robots to do it, right? And it kind of lacks the soul. And so what did I do? I changed it a little bit darker, right? Darker, the mood and tone of the room, right? Feels a little more darker. And it's backlit, so it feels very odd, you know what I mean? Then it's gonna kind of set up the lighting scenario for the face. And then the yellows are a little towards green, right? It's not green, but it's like a little more towards green. And it has a sickly kind of feel to it, right? And because that's the story I'm trying to say, right? That's why I made those decisions. You know, if I wanted something more comfortable, something more welcoming, you can pick a color palette like that. But that's not what I wanted to do, right? So hopefully that makes sense. It's a lot of like, you're just making story decisions and you're using hue, tone, value to help make that call. It's not always like that, right? You don't have to go that deep into like actually designing stuff. But that is, you know, what we do as designers, especially somebody that does like color keys a lot, right? A lot those things matter, right? They'll talk about that in movies and animation and stuff because that's what we do, right? That we design our scenes and our moments to really help convey some sort of story plot. And the better you can do it in your paintings, the better your chances of kind of like having a job and staying employed and stuff tends to be, because that you're doing exactly what they need you to do, right? Oftentimes you can get a job like this and be wondering why like it's not working out, right? Because if you've never done this before, something that happens a lot is you might get a job. Oops, sorry, it's kind of... All right, so you might get a job, and you're like, technically speaking, the painting you're doing might look amazing, right? It might look like some of the best paintings you've ever done, and then they're like, that's not really quite what we're looking for. Thanks, though, you know, and then you end up like that job not working out, essentially, right? That's happened to me, like more often than I'm proud to say, essentially, right? But it happens because you're usually missing something. You know, maybe you don't really quite understand what they were asking of you. You know, maybe there's like, you know, speed issues, whatever it was. But oftentimes, especially when it comes to like mood and color, you can paint a whole scene correctly and still get it wrong. You know what I'm saying? You can still like, you know, be doing an entire thing and still be, and they're like, that's not what we're looking for. You're like, I painted it exactly the way you said, you know? It's because you oftentimes you might be missing those cues, you know? So, but yeah. Great questions, by the way, guys. This is like really, these are the conversations that you want to have, right? This is things that, like, you know, whenever I was in school, it was a lot of like, I just want to use color. And then, you know, you start using color, you start doing your thing, right? And then, you know, it's just like, cool, I know to use color, but why is my color not working? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's going on here? Like, why does it look so like, it's so, you know, so boring. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just bad oftentimes. Like, this is me. I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm talking about me. Like I'm doing the things that they tell me to do, right? But that, like, just the application of learning how to paint, that's one thing, right? Just understanding that you're like, hey, I'm just, you know, I'm learning how to just do the process, right? But then after that, it's like, how do you actually use that understanding, you know? Because now, you know, when you when you learn how to paint, you're just learning how to do like values and hue and saturation, right? Like hue, saturation, brightness, right? You're just learning how to use those effectively. And that's the first step. And most of the time, it really is like just learn how to paint whatever it is that you want to paint, right? You got to be good at actually let's do center. There you go. What the hell is this? Yeah, you have to be good at actually learning, actually like doing the thing that you're trying to do, right? But then after that, you kind of you need to start figuring out like what happens when I do this, right? What happens when I just make the decision to show this thing, or like what happens when I shift the hue 2 degrees to the right? What kind of decisions can I make to help that idea come across better, right? And these are the things that we want to talk about. Oftentimes, when I find students, whenever they're doing stuff, it's like once they learn how to paint, they're like, cool, move on to the next, right? And it's like what you really want to be doing is figuring out what the hell everyone else is thinking of whenever they're like you know what I mean? Have you ever asked somebody like, why'd you make that decision? Like, why are you using this greenish, sickly yellow color? Because I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'd never do that. That's dumb. It looks gross. That color is not appealing in any kind of way, right? Because, we're always taught like, do appealing colors, right? Put every color down, because I've seen people that are like, dude, look, dude, like, so there's yellow here. And if I put the opposite color right next to it, right? Oh shit! Look how good that. And then you flatten that down and you smudge it around, right? And you're like, dude, I'm so good at color, man. And it's like, no, that's not how that works, man. You're helping design a moment with that color, right? Using color and designing with color, 2 very different things. And once you learn what that means, your image design skills get so much higher, I don't want to call anybody out, but if you are offended by that, maybe reevaluate the way you use colors. Let's see. So now that you have so much more experience under your belt with color keys, are you able to keep clients, or can things still not click even? Oh yeah. No, that's I mean, the likelihood of me dropping a client is reduced, absolutely, right? Like, the question is, or I guess I didn't read it all. Are you always able to keep clients, or can things not click even with so much experience, right? So that happens all the time. I drop clients. I don't want to say like, I'm not saying like every client, you know what I mean? But every once in a while, I'll do the best that I can, and the client still isn't happy, right? There's just like, that's not really what we're looking for, right? And that happens. It is what it is, right? I try to do my best to understand what went wrong, right? Because there's a couple different things that you really need to be aware of. One of the first things that you want to be aware of is it's not always you, right? And I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's their fault, this and that or whatever, right? But the whole idea being is you just might not be a right fit. You know what I'm saying? They're looking for like a Final Fantasy type of designer, right? I'm not your guy for that, right? I'd love to be if anybody's looking. But what I'm saying is, I do certain designs. I have certain kind of habits. I do certain render styles. If you're looking for someone to paint like The Last of Us, maybe don't call the viz dev artist in animation, right? Call the game guy that does all the 3D shit, right? That's probably the better choice. And so sometimes it just wasn't a good fit, and whoever hired you, right, maybe just made the wrong call when they hired you. But also remember too, when you get a job, like when you get an offer, obviously when you first start, it's a lot harder to do this because you kind of like frothing at the mouth, like you'll take whatever you can get, right? But when you get to a certain experience and you're a little more comfortable, you really should be rejecting jobs that don't fit you. This happens all the time where people will call me. It's like, hey, you working on this thing? You have work experience? Great. We need a professional. I'm like, I am a professional. And like, hey, can you do this like heavy 3D scene? We're looking for something like The Last of Us, and we're doing this thing. I'm like, I can try. I can do the best that I can to get there, but you're better off just hiring somebody that can just do that, you know? And I just tell them straight up. We're like, you know, if you're truly like really wanting me to do this because there's something about my work that you like, I'll do it. But I'm probably not the best fit for your job, right? And they really appreciate that because more often than not, they're like, oh, okay, cool, you know. And I'll usually recommend. I use that opportunity to recommend a friend or somebody that's like, I know that they do this stuff. Let me hook them up, you know. So I use it for opportunities like that. But also, they really like that. They're like, hey, this guy is honest as hell. Let me, you know, maybe right now it didn't work out, but they seem nice. When we do get something that works out, chances are they'll call me again. You know what I'm saying? But you have to be willing to give it up because I think in the beginning it's always like, I haven't gotten an opportunity in 6 months. I don't know how this is gonna turn out. This and that, blah blah blah. Right? It's just I mean, it's a desperate time, right? Um, no, shame on anybody that is like that because that's a very real scenario, right? But yeah, I try my best to just say like, if if I can't do it, I try to call it out in the beginning because the worst thing that you can do is say that you can and then fail the job because now your reputation is hurt because they're like, we called Kenny and he just let us down. Like it doesn't even matter if you're not a good fit. You said you were a good fit, and then now you're just you messed it up, right? And then on top of that, they're probably behind schedule now. So not only did you mess up and they have to pay money now, generally they'll still pay you even if they don't like the work. They kind of have to, right? You did work. Bad work is still work, right? But it's like, you know, they still have to pay you. So they're paying you for work they can't use, and then now they're deeper in their timeline and it's an emergency now. So they have to pay more money to make this thing happen. You know what I mean? And so it just sets a bad precedent, and you want to just really try to get in front of that. You know what I'm saying? I know this is a slight deviation from what we were talking about a second ago with like, does it still fall through? This is part of that, right? You want to be the professional that says that tells them what they need, right? Because that's what we do at the end of the day, right? We're the artist. More often than not, I'm actually not talking, especially in the first couple rounds. I'm not actually talking to to an artist, right? I'm talking to like producers or I'm talking to like management type people. So it's like they're looking at the work, they're blown away. They're like, "Oh shit!" Right? And I mean, it's not like I'm not like faulting them or anything. It's just not what they do, right? They're not the ones that handle the art, so most work that you do is probably gonna look pretty good, right? It happens with like your parents and stuff, where it's like your parents are always proud of the work that you've done because they probably can't draw as well as you can, no matter what level you're at, right? Generally speaking, they probably look at your work and they're like, that's amazing. I can't believe that you can do something like that. And in your mind, you're like, I'm still a student, man. I still have such a long way to go or whatever, right? Same idea. And so that's one possible thing that could happen, right? When it comes to clients, losing clients, you just weren't a good fit for that thing. Next thing being, you can have just bad direction. You can have like an art director that tells you one thing but means another, and they don't really know what they're looking for, and it's just this mess, right? We've people that have worked, what I'm talking about, right? It's always like, I worked with this art director and they were just terrible. I've had my fair share of terrible art directors, right? Just the worst of the worst for many reasons, right? A lot of times it's management skills. Oftentimes, it's usually that. Sometimes their art skill actually isn't that good. I've had like 20 or 30 different art directors that I've worked with. Some of the best in the industry and some of the worst I've ever seen, right? And it's a mixed bag. And as the professional, right, you have to be able to navigate that somehow, learning how to ask questions, learning how to get what you need out of that person. I think when I first started, I got lucky because the art director was, generally speaking, pretty good at his job. So whenever I was working with him, there was a good amount of like direction that would he would give us. So it's like, oh yeah, you know where you're going, and then like the next jobs or any job after that, I had some art directors where they wouldn't give me the same setup, and I would flounder, right? I dropped the ball. I'm like, dude, I've done assignments like this before. In my mind, I didn't say it to him. In my mind, I'm like, dude, what happened? Like, I've done assignments like this before. This isn't new to me. And why is my hit ratio of like, good paintings and bad paintings different per art director, right? And I started having to learn what that was. And so what happened is I started learning how to ask the right questions. You know what I mean? Like being like, hey, so what are you thinking here? Or what's the main reference that you're kind of looking at when you're showing me these things? Because sometimes they'll just hand you, like, they'll just be like, oh yeah, this is just a folder of references that I was kind of thinking. And then you latch onto the wrong one, and then the whole project goes awry, right? And it's a lot of that. Sometimes it's just like, it's not the art skill. It could just very much be just like you're not meshing with the art director, you're not on task with like the references they give you or whatever it is, right? And then things can just go wrong in life. You have family members that are sick. I've had family members pass away during work, not like during my work, but like I was working and they passed away, right? And it's distracting. You know what I mean? I don't say like your mind isn't there when you're working, right? And so what happens is you're just not on your game like normal. So it happens for sure. You just have to do whatever you can to kind of mitigate it as much as possible, right? Sorry, that was a really long-winded, very twisty, turny kind of conversation. But yeah, it happens to the best of us. I think for me, it's like, don't take it too personally. It happens. Especially in a field like this where it's so performance driven, right? Like I think for me, like when I was working at Blick before, just selling art supplies, you could show up just hungover. You know what I'm saying? Like I never did. I don't drink, but I'm saying you could show up after a night of partying or whatever, and I mean, you'll probably be fine. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it's not really performance driven like that. There is performance metrics you got to hit and whatever, right? I'm not saying it's easy, but there are things where it's like you can just, more often than not, it's just a warm body. You know what I'm saying? We just need a person that's alive to be there and make sure nothing gets stolen, right? Art's not that. And if that's just something you got to be aware of, right? Your skill level, your performance, your ability to design on the fly and make designs that nail target every time, right? That's our job, and it can be very difficult sometimes to do that day in and day out. This is why if you've taken my classes before, if you've heard me speak. I'm always talking about process. I'm always talking about, just all the, all the small things of like, being professional, all those things, because that's really the difference more often than not, so boom. Great questions, everybody. This is dope. Oops. Wait. There it is. All right. So I'm just like taking it piece by piece, right? I went to the TV. I just kind of started rendering that. I'm just rendering pieces as we kind of go, and you know, hopefully you can kind of see where I'm going here. It's just like take the piece, render it, and it just looks nicer. You know what I mean? I'm gonna add more detail. I'm still doing it right now. But a lot of this stuff is like, for one, don't rely so much on your 3D to make sure that everything looks good, right? What I'm doing here is I'm spending the extra time adding more design cues as well, right? Like a lot of the stuff, adding more layers, cleaning things up, doing whatever. A lot of that stuff is can be overlooked because you're like, oh, I did it in 3D, cool. I know what I'm doing. I know how I did it, you know. But in reality, it could be missing a lot of detail that that you're just kind of like you just won't add because you're thinking that the 3D kind of got you, right? And more often than not, it kind of leads you astray. So try not to trust that too much. Obviously, if you're really good at 3D and you're really strong like 3D artist, do what you need to do. But for those of you like learning, for those of you like kind of developing your skills and this and that, right? Really try to repaint everything, right? Because the more you repaint, the better. For one, the better you're gonna get, right? Your eye just gets stronger, and your understanding of painting abilities just gets better, right? Because now you're trying to match the 3D when it comes to painting, right? And that's really where skill like really develops. Because I think for me, the less I painted, or the less I like added to the painting, you kind of just don't get as good because you never have to. But the farther away a lot of these paintings are, whenever I'm like like doing it, like the looser the 3D model, especially like the vehicle design one, or even like this one where I didn't add any materials, you start learning how to actually do it yourself, and you start seeing, like, for one, what actually makes the thing look good. You know what I mean? Like what how do we actually make this this painting look solid? And then two, you're creating stylistic choices based off of like who you are. So now when you paint, it's not just some like, it's not just some like 3D render that looks a certain way. It's actually you painting this thing, deciding and creating a look that's unique to you, right? In a world where you need to stand out, you don't want to do the thing that everyone else is doing, right? And just clicking render and being okay with that, generally speaking, is not going to get you there, just by nature, right? It looks exactly the same as the way everyone else does it. Because Blender, it's going to render out the same way regardless of who clicked on render, right? So now you're automatically working in the same kind of arena as other people. You know what I'm saying? So. All right. Check that out. Bro, let's go. And so, like, I'm just going to keep working through this. Well, you see how, like, I'm increasing the lighting, right? The reflectiveness is getting a lot better. There's, like, just various cues and stuff. I'm just pushing the design skills in the material rendering, in everything, right? This is where I'm making decisions to do things like that. I'm not relying on any of the programs to kind of do that, because in my mind, you don't want to let the logic of the scene dictate how you light this scene, right? So for example, I have a lighting scenario where, I physically put a light there in the scene, and then that's how it turns out, right? And so whenever I'm painting, I don't let that logic stop me from making decisions. If I need a rim light somewhere, I'll do it, right? Because I needed, for example, I needed this chest area right here, right, to kind of pop off a bit more against that kind of darker shoulder right behind it, right? And so I'll put a rim light right there just so it pops off, even though there is no rim light, and I mean the closest color, right, that TV color is probably right there, but even then that could just be from something else off screen, who knows, but the point is, I made that decision based off of needs rather than logic, right? When you're painting, right, you want to follow the logic as much as possible when it comes to like the main light, I have that big light casting down, and so I'm going to follow that logic. But I don't need to follow that logic everywhere. And as long as it doesn't stand out too much, you'll be okay making a lot of like decisions like that. Because the thing is, especially in like movies or entertainment design as a whole, right? We put lights in places that shouldn't be there. You know, if you've ever seen the way a movie set works, you'll see that they'll just have random lights. They'll have under desks, you know, around stuff where there really wouldn't be lights, but they want a little bit of that fill. They want a little bit of that rim light somewhere. That's what we're doing, right? We're deciding that, I just want that to pop off a little bit more. I want this thing to kind of be there, right? And then once you get that, you know, you're able to actually make compelling, interesting images that stand out. Oftentimes we follow this logic of like, oh, there's not a light there though, so it needs to go to black. And it's like, well, that's not really the logic that we need to follow because that's not the logic that looks good, right? That doesn't look good, so I'm not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? So. Boom. Let's go. And so now, like, I'm seeing this a little bit of metal kind of reflecting off that arm right there. So I'm like, oh, what if I just incorporate some of that? Because I need this spot to be a tad bit brighter, right? And now you start seeing like the logic start kind of coming in. There's some times where I just do something illogical, and then there's other times where, you know, I just kind of make things happen just, you know, because it needs to look a certain way, right? So, cool. Oh, where's my... Boom. Let me close all this stuff out. Where's my Notion at? Here it is. All right. So, a couple conversations I want to talk about. So, as we're like, you know, and we're in this right now, we're in this kind of weird time, right? I think for everybody that's like working in said industry or even like thinking about coming, you've probably heard things, right? It's just like, you know, it's a scary time right now. I'm not going to sugarcoat that in any way. It's just that's what it is, right? Right now it is difficult to find work. Something I will say though, I think we lose track or lose, I guess, sight of like really how to find work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think for me, there's this. I see a lot of students do it where like they only go to things where they see professionals because they're like, hey, you know, professionals are here, so let me be here, right? Like same reason why if I'm hanging out in the Discord, people will show up, right? Just because they're like, oh, Kenny's there, let me go talk, right? But if anybody else is there, no. You know what I'm saying? If I'm not there, they won't be there. That's, you know. And if you're one of those people, I will say this. You really want to rethink how you're approaching this networking game, right? Because at the end of the day, the people that are going to help you the most, right, when times are tough, when the industry's kind of, you know, not great, right, is the people that you were just hanging out with whenever things were good, right? People that actually helped you, right? I meet so many people on a day-to-day basis, right? Just through work, through industry events, through whatever, right? I mean, not day-to-day, but, you know, just in general, right? Just because even just tabling, I met like, I don't know, hundreds of people just throughout the 3 days, right? And more often than not, I just don't remember you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not personal. It's just there's so many people. It's a big event. And, you know, it is what it is, right? It's not, I'm not saying that because I'm like, you know, I'm like I'm ignoring everybody around me kind of thing, you know? But the whole point is, it's really hard to just get to know anybody at events like that because, you know, it's just hard to remember anybody because there's so many faces, there's so many portfolios. If you show me a portfolio, I probably remember the work. I probably don't remember you that well. You know what I'm saying? And this is kind of where when you have, you know, like when you have a group of people that are kind of looking out for you, right? That's where things actually get, like, you know, you actually build those real connections, you know? And if you're not like actively participating in anything, right? And you only participate when someone like me's there, right? You might want to reevaluate that. You know, I'll say this. I think it's funny too. Lauren just showed up. There's a group that hangs out on my Mondays, y'all Sundays, in the Discord. In this Discord, right? There's like 3 people that there are at least 2 that are here right now that hang out during that time. And it's something where if you're not, if you don't show up to those types of things, right? Where when people are hanging out and you don't show up, think about how many connections you actually have, right? Because I bet you that those 2 numbers are extremely correlated. If you show up to 0 of those, you probably don't know anybody. And the reason for that is because you never talk to anybody. If you're working in the industry, whatever, you don't have to show up to shit, right? You do whatever you want. But for those of you that are looking for work and really trying to, like get your first foot in the door, and then you see 5 to 10 other people hanging out in a room and you don't show up, I'm not saying you show up to make that connection. Don't do that. That's gross, right? What I am saying though is the people there are the people that are actually doing stuff to actually make their job, their life better, right? In some sort of way, right? They're actively, working together. They're giving each other critiques, talking shit, whatever. You know what I mean? We're talking about racism one of the days that I was there. You know what I'm saying? And it's just something where it's just conversation, but that conversation is actually what helps. Because for me, whenever I was first getting started, I would I would just join sketch nights. People were around. My first sketch night, I was just hanging out with people. Now, let's see, so I went to a sketch night with 4 people. Well, I was 1, so 3 other people. 1 is an art director now, like a senior art director. And then 1 is a creative director. And the other guy is like the art department lead, right? But at the time, they were just some dudes that I just talk shit with and draw with. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that to show off or anything. You say, oh yeah, look at my friends, But at the time, we were no one. And then, how many years has it been? 10 years later, right? Now you're somebody. You know what I'm saying? I didn't go there because I knew that they, I knew that they were going to be hits. I didn't go there because they were somebody that I was like, I need to hitch my wagon here. You know what I'm saying? Like I need to soak this up. You know what I'm saying? I was just there because I sucked at drawing and they were drawing. You know what I'm saying? I went there and worked on perspective. I went there and worked on paintings. And I went there, like I drove. I was broke, so gas was expensive. I mean, if you're broke, everything's expensive. But I didn't have that much money. But I just took time. It was Wednesdays at 7. And I drove up to the place that we were to meet at, and we just sat down, turned on some music, talked shit, and just drew. You know what I'm saying? And that was it. There was no like expectation to be like, hey, they're gonna hire me. It's like, oh fuck, the teacher's there. Let me go do that. It's like it was none of that. It was just, I suck. I'm gonna suck less if I go. You know what I'm saying? And so for those of you that are like looking to be part of a community and you see somebody like, or even if you don't see anybody, start something. It doesn't even have to be in this Discord, right? Be part of something, because if you start now, 5-10 years down the line, when the next crisis, right, it's not going to be so hard, right? For those, I'm not saying this as don't do it as insurance, right? That's obvious. That's the wrong message to take away from this. But it's just like you need to get better, they need to get better, and you might as well do it together, right? You might as well like do it as a group rather than just all fail separately. You know what I'm saying? And so, when you're a student, don't go to these places with the expectation of like, oh, hey, Kenny's there. Let me pop in because, he has something to say or whatever. I'll be there sometimes. Absolutely. Because, I love being around those things because that's, I credit those events, for getting me to where I am today. Right. But it wasn't because there was a professional there. you know, is because just a bunch of friends were there and we were there to help each other out and do whatever, and you know, and come with questions. Just talk to me and don't be weird about it. You know, don't be like, hey guys, you want to link in connect. You know, it's just the wrong mentality. It's just not good to do shit like that. You know, but if you're like, hey, you know, I need to work on perspective. Or hey, do you guys want to do like a design challenge? I saw this thing and you know I kind of want to do that or whatever, right? That's it. That's the fucking game, man. You know, and you just go with zero expectations. I'm not saying it's gonna pan out now. It almost never does, right? But years later, it's going to. I promise you, because chances are everybody that stays and does their thing, right? Like everybody that stays in the industry and kind of like, you know, continues just working on themselves or whatever, that it's almost inevitable. It is extremely hard not to progress in this industry. If you stay at a place long enough, you'll be the art director. I promise you. You just have to have the fortitude to stay through, you know, whatever crisis happen, right? But chances are, you stay at a place long enough, you're probably gonna be the art director there. Just give it time, you know. Not saying that's always a good thing, but that's a whole separate conversation. You know what I mean? But yeah, it really is just show up to those things without the expectation of if a professional's there, I'll come. But if not, it's a waste of time for me, right? Because 5 or 6 years from now, when everyone's getting work and you wonder why no one talks to you, it's because you didn't talk to anybody else. You know, it's not personal, but you just never showed up. And it's just things to think about. Community is the easiest way to get to where you need to go. And if you can set that up, you're probably going to do pretty well. But if you don't, it's not personal. It's just they don't know you. You know, no one knows you because you're not around. You know what I'm saying? So things like that, things I notice just, you know, as an artist, as somebody that, you know, part of a community first and foremost. And then two, someone like, you know, this is not the first time I've done stuff like this, right? It's like, you know, these are just things that we've done. This isn't new, you know. I've never run it in a Discord before. We had Facebook groups, we had plein air sessions, and those people that showed up, they're all working at this point. You know what I mean? Whether it was because somebody you know, hooked them up, or whether they just got better, or whatever it was. Everyone there is working at this point in time, and it's just like, you know, from the time when I was doing it back then, and that's all it is, you know. So just be around, be active, right, and be part of something without that expectation. I promise you, it pays off. Because if you're ever wondering, like, oh, how do I find work? You know, nothing's really coming in. I just lost my job and this and that. Like, yeah, it sucks and that happens. But it sucks even harder when you do it alone. You know, when you're by yourself and you don't know who to talk to. You know, especially like when you're kind of deeper in that career space, it's hard. It's hard as hell because, you know, you haven't had to make those connections before. You know, but then you start wondering, like, man, why doesn't anybody know who I am? It's because you don't put yourself out there. You don't talk. You don't do the thing. You know, so I don't call anybody out, but you know, it's just. When I see those things and I see people wondering, it always kind of like, you know, I'm like, I'm just saying, man, that's it, you know. But well, who knows? I'm just I'm just a guy. I'm just some random guy. Nah, I don't want that. Cool. Let's go, dude. It is funny though, like actually talking about it now, because like, you know, I hadn't thought about that sketch group in a long time. It was a sketch group that me and a couple friends had back in like 2015, so I guess 9 years ago. And like, you know, it's just I just sucked at drawing, and I was like, dude, I need to get better at drawing. And they're like, and then a friend had just invited me, hey, do we do the sketch group thing? I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come, you know. I'll see what's up, you know, and I just, you know, you just get better at it. And it's funny because I didn't keep track. Like, obviously, I know what they're doing, and I know who they are, and you know, I still keep in touch and everything. But like, I never, I didn't quantify who those people are today, you know. And it's actually it's legit crazy thinking about it now, where I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that is who they are now. I'm like, holy fuck. But yeah, it's just funny. It's crazy how things turn out. I think right now for everybody, like as you're going through your career, right, it's crazy right now. This is, you know, I would say right now is some of the craziest times I've seen, you know, in the past 10 years, right? Just through I guess my experience, right? Obviously, there's probably been crazier times. I don't know what '08 was like for some people, right? Like during that bigger crash. I don't know what all that was like, but for us now, it's just like, you know, it feels crazy, and really getting the right friend circle around you is gonna be huge, right? It's one of the most important things you can do. I would say, like, I've gotten jobs, you know, through applying, right? And I've also gotten through like recommendation. Through recommendation is the best way to find work. I promise you. Like when you're applying to when you're applying to a job, it's always like, what can you do for us? You know, like what kind of skills do you bring? And it's just like this pissing competition. I hate it. It's just like, because you always get this person that's like on their high horse, and they're like, I'm like, dude, just shut the fuck up, man. Like, you know why I'm here? I'm here because I need cash and you're offering it. You know what I mean? Let's not like, you know, beat around the bush here. It's they're like, you know, why do you want to work here? You know, this and that. And it's like, dude, because you're paying and I need money, right? Like that's what it is at the end of the day. And it's just this whole like dance that you have to do, and I find it extremely annoying because I'm like, dude, I'm wasting time here. I'm dying. You know what I mean? Because of this conversation. It is actively killing me. But you have to do it, right? Because that's the job at the end. That's what we do. You have to have that conversation, and you know, it is what it is. And then whatever insignificant, you know, job this person has or whatever, they get to use this moment to like, it feels like torture, where you have to kind of humor their, like, you know, I'm not saying this for everybody, you know what I mean, but it happens a lot where you're like, you know, they kind of have this high horse about them, like, you know, we only hire the most original people, you know, I have a good eye for this and that. I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude, you know, like, whatever. I'm not saying this, I'm not making up this. This is a real conversation that I had with like a hiring person before, you know, and you just have to deal with it. But the difference is, whenever you get hired by a friend or you get recommended, it's so weird. You know those scams? That's a funny way to start that. But like, you know, when for those that are like looking for work and stuff, you've seen those ones like, hey, we're looking for some artists. You know, we need you to start tomorrow. Can you start? You know what I mean? Like, it's really like, this is too good to be true kind of thing, and it feels like a scam. It feels like that whenever someone's hiring you through like a recommendation, right? It's always like they're like, I'm like, you don't even know me, and I might not even be a real person, and you're like offering me this job. That's crazy, you know what I mean? But it's just like, yeah, that's what it is, because somebody else knew you, so they were like, oh yeah, hire this person, hire Kenny, you know, hire whoever. And it's funny how that happens. It just feels so fake until literally like the first meeting where I'm sitting there in front of them, we're on a call. I'm like, oh shit, you are real. That's crazy, dude, you know? But it's like, it happens so fast, and it's really interesting to see that. And you know, getting hired through a recommendation like that, I think for me it's so much more relieving. It's crazy. I can't even explain it. You go from like, you know, what can you do to help this company progress in its goals and achieve these things, to like hey man, when are you available to start? And then they're like, I'm like, yeah. They're like, cool, we'll see you Monday, you know, kind of thing. And it's just so, it's weirdly easy, you know. So, you know, be around, right? Just talk to people. I promise you it pays off. But you got to play the long game, you know. And it sucks too, where it's like, you know, when you see opportunities, and I know people do this too, where it's like, you see opportunities, and then, you know, it's like, oh, I'm gonna keep this quiet because I want to get this job. So if I tell everybody, then I'm going, it's, you know, there's more competition and I can't get it, type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you see a job on LinkedIn and you won't tell your friends, you know, like, don't, like, you know, let's not act like, you know, we don't do that, right? And I will say this, it sounds crazy, but tell your friends. You know why? I'm not saying you don't apply, because two things are going to happen. You're going to apply and you're going to get the job. Great, right? Perfect. You got exactly what you wanted, and you're wherever you need to be to do whatever you need to do, right? That's perfect. That's great. Let's say your friend gets the job. Oh, that sucks. You know, it's like, dude, I'm the one that told him. You know what I mean? I lost that position because I told somebody else, right? And that sucks. That really does. But the thing is, now you have a person on the inside that you actively helped. Now they're like, dude, I wouldn't have this job unless Kenny told me. Dude, I should thank him. Next time a position opens, I'm going to recommend that person. You know what I'm saying? And that's what you're aiming for, you know? And I don't do it as a devious way to do it. You know, I'm not saying like, you know, be like, don't play fucking 4D chess expecting, you know, expecting something to work out, you know? But that's the thing. It's, if you're greedy about things, nothing's going to come your way because you never sent anything anybody else's way. You know what I mean? And that's a terrible way to go through this industry. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying you don't need to do that. There's plenty of people out there that will 100% disagree with what I'm telling you right now. And I can almost guarantee you they don't get that much work. You know what I mean? I don't say it like that. But this is like, I've been working for a little bit now, and the people that I've seen that do that kind of stuff, they're usually scrounging for work. They're usually like desperate for anything that comes through, and you know, because they don't really get that many recommendations. You know why? Because they don't recommend anybody to anywhere. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it's just like, just be helpful. It sucks. You have to give up some opportunities sometimes. And who's to say you would have even got it to begin with? You know what I mean? You might not have got, you might not be a good fit, you know, but but that conversation never happens, because if you didn't get the job and your friend did, automatically he stole it from me. Right? Because, you know, I had that position, and then, you know, it's like, but I told them and they got it. Right? It's that whole idea of like, you never come to the conclusion of, oh, I might not have gotten it either. You know what I mean? Like they still could have passed me up. You know, they could have saw my portfolio first and they passed me up, you know? But you would never think that, you know, that's not the first thing, you know? So, you know, it's things to think about, right? You know, just be helpful, be around, offer things to people, and do it as a team, because if you try to do it alone, oh my God, it sucks, dude. That's the kind of shit that makes you want to quit, you know? Like the people that want to like are questioning this industry, that's why, you know? It's just like, because this industry sucks, you know? Like there's some really great things about it where, you know, we get to draw and paint for a living. We get to design for our favorite IPs. We get to be part of things that like was super influential to us growing up, right? But also, it's a business. Also, there's things that you know, that just aren't great, and we're seeing a lot of that now. And the best thing you can do is form a group of friends that knows how to mitigate those things, because one, you have people around you that have experienced something, so you can ask them. But then two, sorry, I'm trying to get a cough drop. Sorry if that's loud. But two, you can, you know, like you don't feel alone, right? Because if you feel like you're the only one not finding work, sorry, if you feel like you're the only one not getting work, it feels lonely. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, you know, when people talk, you start realizing, oh, it's not just me, it's everybody. You know what I'm saying? And it makes you, obviously, it doesn't help. You're still not employed. You know what I mean? Like it's still not a great experience, but it's a lot better than when you're by yourself. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, just things. I'm just a guy. Who knows? I'm just talking shit. You know what I mean? Oh, Darren says, "What's plein air?" Yeah, it's just when you paint, when you go outdoors and paint. Uh, I think, I could be mistaken. Maybe I shouldn't just make this shit up. But I think I heard somewhere that it was like in one breath, right? Which just means in one session, essentially. Plein air painting. Let's see. Anyway, I might have made that up. Who knows? But it's outdoor painting, and you're just like you're not. It's not a like a full on rendering process. We're not doing like stuff like this. So you go outside and you kind of paint, and like what I liked to do whenever I was kind of getting started, it was a lot of like we just call friends and be like, hey, we're gonna play A here, and I did it this past year for those that didn't show up, that are in the LA area. But anyway, we would go and we just paint, and you know, half the time we're just talking shit. It really is like, for those of you that are like fishing, or you like hanging out with people and just talking, you know, that's just what that was. We were painting, we were getting better at our craft, but it was mostly a way to just talk. And I've made some of my best friends in the industry because of that. You know, all of my best friends are the same people that I went to plein air paint with. Like, no shit. Like that's you know, if you ask who my best friends are, it's the same people that went to plein air paint with us, right? Because it's just the bond that you just make. You're just there, right? I mean, you're talking and you're experiencing these things, and you know, you just naturally become friends with these, because you're sitting there for like 3 or 4 hours at the very least on a Sunday or whatever, you know, whenever you guys decide to go. And it's I don't know, it's a nice experience. And then on top of that, you're getting better at art. You know, you're actively, you know, receiving skill. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're actively pushing yourself to be better. So it's a really good thing to do. If you haven't done it before, highly recommend it. If you're like ever struggling with painting, it's probably why. It's because you're not doing plein air painting in the open air, right? There you go. But yeah, let's see. What else did I want to talk about? So sorry if you're watching this. Not you guys watching here, but the person I'm about to talk about. If you're watching this, and you know, I don't want to make example. I'm not gonna say who you are, so don't worry about it. But I will say, for everybody here, make yourself able to be contacted. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know who you are, that, you know what I'm talking about. Sorry, bro, but I had to, you know, I just gotta let people know. So, true story. I recommended a friend for a position, for a thing, right? Recently, like fucking yesterday, you know, and I sent his art station, and then the art director, you know, emails me back. He's like, "Oh, hey, I can't find this guy's email." And I was like, "What?" I didn't say this. It was just through email. But I was like, "What the hell?" So I went to his art. I was like, "Where the hell is your email?" And I had to like text him, be like, "Dude, what's your email?" So this guy can fucking contact you. So, you know, long story short, make yourself contactable. You know, just things to just things to be, you know, to do. What I would highly recommend for everybody right now, right? Go to your ArtStation, go to all your social medias, right? And say, how can they contact me? And try to contact yourself. You know, open incognito tab and, you know, try to go through the site and then email with the other email you have, or have a friend be like, hey, contact me through my website real quick. Just, you know, there's like there's 9 people in this room right now in the Discord, right? Contact each other. Go to somebody's website if you have a website, whether it's an ArtStation website, Instagram, whatever social media you're using. Try to contact yourself. Just try it. Just, you know, you'll be surprised. Some people, they're like, oh yeah, I guess it is really hard to contact me, and you're like, huh, well, maybe that has something to do with why I'm not able to find work. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, just don't make it impossible for someone to call you, because they'll give up quick. I promise. If I can't, like, if I'm looking through somebody's thing, and for those of you that don't have your real name as your, you know, like, as your either Discord or your like social media or whatever, like, I don't care what your screen name is. If I can't find your real name, I promise you, I'm not contacting you, you know? Because I'm like, who is this person? You know what I'm saying? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be like, you know, I just need a nickname or something, but I don't need a screen name to be contacting. You know what I'm saying? Like, hi, Big Nut 24 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, it's like, what the hell? Like, just give me like a real name. You know what I mean? Like, put a face out there, because that's what you're doing, right? This isn't a like a, you know, a game server. You know what I'm saying? This is a professional like workforce. Like, you're hoping for people to find you. You can have your other name associated. That's fine, you know, but have it so people, when they look at your screen name, they should know what to call you at the very least, right? Because if you do like, because I have you know, screen name type things all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you know, I play games too. I do all sorts of stuff. I have other emails, right? But, you know, whenever I'm, you know, in a professional setting, it's Kennyvo Art or Kennyvo or Kenny Vinvo, right? Because that's my name, right? That's who you contact when you're looking for this person to you know, work with in any sort of way. Make sure it's easy to find you. I can't stress that enough. It sounds basic. There's 9 people here. I guarantee you one of you does not have your email set somewhere, or your, you know, or your real name or whatever. And it sounds crazy, but it's I mean, it's the difference, because your opportunities don't come that often. And if you're not in a position to take an opportunity, you know, you're just playing it on hard mode for whatever reason, you know. Come on, bro. I'm trying to be that one cool, mysterious artist that no one can ever contact. Trying to be one of Banksy, you know. I'm not gonna lie. I feel that part where you give your real name on the internet feels wrong, because at a young age people don't do that. But as a person seeing your work, you kind of need. Yeah, you know. I think it's like, just be careful, right? Some people put like their phone numbers in their emails. Don't do that. Like, don't put your phone number on anything, right? Even like your resume and stuff. The only time I give out my phone number is when they ask, you know. You know, and this is like if a recruiter or like a business is asking me for my phone number, and even then I'm like, why? You know, they don't really ask you that often. Sometimes they will, but more often than not they won't. And so like, you know, I get it for sure, and you know, you can keep it like a nickname. You know, if your name is, I don't know, like, if your name is like Jonathan, you can be like John or something. You know what I'm saying? That's fine, but at least give him a real name. You know what I'm saying? Like, give him something to talk about. Give him somebody to contact, because at the end of the day, you have to remember, this is like Disney contacting you. This is like, you know, this is like a company, like a recruiter, an adult with a career trying to contact you as an individual. And, like, I don't know, like fucking Asian baller, 818 or some shit like that. It's like, it's not gonna get you that call. It's just not gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you gotta remember, you have to be professional in this field. And that's where it comes down to, where if you, let's say for example, because some people, they have like not like burner accounts, but just accounts where they just kind of like meme post and whatever, right? They just shit post or whatever. That's fine, you can do that, but just don't associate that with your art account. You know what I mean? Just make a separate Instagram. Just do a separate thing for that. It doesn't have to be the same account. You'll probably be okay. So. But I'm just I don't know, maybe I'm just old. Who knows? Maybe I'm just out of touch with the way things are. If I could, I would just go with Badassatron. Yeah, dude. I mean, you try it. You gotta be good. That you have to actually be badass, because then you start fighting that, like, that judgment, right? If you're like, it's like, is he badass? Is he actually that good? That's where you go wrong, dude. But you guys tell me how that goes. Call me old fashioned. But yeah, I didn't make up this story. This shit's real. Like, I was like, bro, you might want to, get on that email game. And I was like, I need to tell everybody this. This has to. You have to. You gotta go through it at that point, because we can't. I can't let that slide. You know what I mean? So, sorry, bro, but it is what it is. I love you. We're good. We're good, bro. Sick. Look at that. Moving through the rendering, right? And this takes a while. I will say, for everybody, like, I've been going for the last 2 hours and I'm just painting stuff. And I kind of have like my first pass on things. And you see how much clearer things are getting? You know what I mean? Do I have an old version of this? Maybe I don't. I'll just drop it in from previous weeks. Week 3 is a good one. I'll do that. Just kind of show you where I was earlier, right? Just little things, right? And it's like that little bit of attention to detail for materials and stuff. It goes a long way. But I obviously with 3D, it feels right. When the 3D's there, you're like, oh yeah, that's about it. You know what I mean? Like that looks okay at the very least. But it's not quite there, and you have to push it, like paint it, actually get in there and paint stuff. And you saw me sit there and lasso things out. I'm gonna do it the whole way through, and I'm starting at the focal point and moving out, because from here I don't really have to do much. I have to add a weathering pass on this guy, but I need to do the whole thing first before I do that. But after that, I'm done. You know what I mean? And I just kind of move from there. And we have this this opportunity to kind of like really push the lighting, really push your graphic read, make things pop, make edges kind of stand out a bit more, and do what you need to do to make your image look solid, right? But now that you have this comparison, remember how I was talking about at the beginning, for those that were here, right? The beginning, it's like everything feels complete. The reason for that is because the comparison game is between the main focal point and the surroundings, and they're all about the same kind of fidelity, right? But the second I start painting, now you're like, oh shit, that guy to the left, he doesn't look so finished anymore. He starts looking like a block out, essentially, right? And because now there's a comparison between our main chef guy and then the side robot guys, right? And now there's a comparison between the main guy and then the kind of platform thing that he's gonna put the sushi on top of, right in front of him. And so it starts cascading like that, right? I started with that wood grain kind of top, and then now the kind of backsplash like black thing right underneath that platform that starts looking unrendered and incomplete, and it just this cascading effect of, oh, things aren't as done as you thought, right? So for those that remember, right, those are here in the beginning, I was saying you need to compare everything, but because in the beginning you don't have a comparison because everything's of the same quality, it's really hard to do that, right? So just kind of remember those things. Keep pushing that the design skill, right? Really keep rendering and learning how to paint well, but it starts here. Later, Darren. Sorry, he's not here anymore. He can't hear me. All right. Let's see. Any last conversations? Oh. Boom. Oh, if anybody wants to ask something, I've been talking a lot. So if anybody has any questions, just hit me up. I'll give you some time. We're gonna go over a little bit today, just because I did show up a little late today because I had some stuff I had to take care of. But we're just rolling right now, so Nice. He heard me in spirit.
Kenny, I have a question.
What's up, bro?
I was thinking like the top artists, like art director, how they train. Like they don't train anymore, I think, in basics like anatomy, lighting, perspective. What kind of exercise they do to improve?
Interesting. So let me ask you this: what do you think they're improving on?
What I think?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
So, I mean, you can learn other different things like 3D other skills, or
Okay.
maybe animation, other field. But I was thinking more in the specific, like exercises. They do. They do like try to do study in a faster way. I don't know. They time their self. I don't know. I want to know how a really good artist train himself.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the reason I kind of brought it back to you too is like I want you to kind of, for everybody, right? I want you to kind of consider what do you think professional artists that are good at painting, right? And obviously, there's always room to improve. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're done improving. But what I will say is, more often than not, you'll start seeing that these higher level artists stop practicing drawing and painting, right? They don't do as many studies. Obviously, there's like, we can always be better, and there's always like, I guess, areas for people to I guess improve in when it comes to just painting skills, right? If you're not if you're not at the top of the painting world, generally speaking, you're probably still working on painting skills. So the reason I want to talk about this is because, well, what is it then, right? Because in my mind, whenever I first started, it was a lot of like, oh, so, like they just work on painting more, right? They just paint more and do stuff, It's like, because that's what you do. You see what I'm saying? Like, as artists, as students, right? It's always like, I need to get better at drawing and painting and design. So what do professionals do? They probably like, try to get better at drawing, painting, and design as well, right? Because I do that, so they just do it better, right? And sometimes that is true. Sometimes, they are doing those things. But what I want to really emphasize here is, usually, more often than not, sorry, I'm like really congested right now. More often than not, they're actually not getting better at drawing and painting. They're getting better through practice, just because they do a lot of painting. Like at work, you do a ton of painting. Like every week, I'm like 5 or 6 paintings in. You know what I'm saying? Sorry. Every week, I'm 5 or 6 paintings in. So that's 5 or 6 paintings a week. That's like 20 paintings a month on top of freelance, on top of this stream right here, on top of personal work that I might do for various things, right? And so I'm always painting, but I'm not focused on getting better at painting anymore. What I am focused on doing is understanding the pipeline better and understanding the deeper level thoughts that come with that skill set. You know what I'm saying? Because yeah, I'm not the best at drawing and painting. I'm not saying I am, right? But after a while, the benefits of getting better at drawing and painting don't do anything anymore, because I can already paint everything that I want to paint. I can paint it better, but painting it better won't make my image better. Does that make sense? Like, it's kind of like it's the same problem with AI, where when people use it, it's what it does is it gets your drawing and painting skills better, essentially. Not yours, but you know, the image output, the quality is better, right? Because that's better than what you can do, generally speaking, right? But something's missing, because if that was the case, we'd be long gone, right? If it was just quality, we'd be long gone. And so as higher level artists, you tend to start actually trying to figure out, well, what makes better images? What makes better storytelling? How do I convey emotion better? How do I get the audience to feel a certain way? How do I sell this IP better? How do I ask the right questions in the right types of rooms? How do I coordinate with teams? How do I work with younger artists? How do I teach better, right? All these other questions that kind of pop up. And so whenever and the reason why I'm so focused on question asking, right, is because whenever I was starting, it was a lot of the same things. It was like, okay, cool, I want to get better at drawing and painting. Great. And then I just, I work on drawing and painting, and then hopefully I kind of, get to where I need to go, kind of thing, right? Because that's what I'm working on. But then you'd be talking to a higher level artist, and then they're just like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm working on this thing. And then it's just like, they just putting together like pitch decks. You're like, what? Like, I'm working on how to render, and he's actively not rendering at all. He's like being looser about things, doing whatever, right? And you're like, wait, what's that about? You know what I mean? Like, why are they working on that? Like, should I be working on that? And it's just like this, you start questioning, like, oh, am I actually doing things right? And it's that level difference that really helps us understand, like, hey, there's other things that I need to be learning, right? Because you only need to be a certain skill level when it comes to drawing and painting. After you're able to communicate basically everything that you're able to do, right? Like, if you can draw and paint basically everything that comes to mind, I don't want to say you're done, but you're mostly there, right? You can do it better, but doing it better won't change anything, right? And so, what do you do now? How do I get better at my job? How do I learn how to interact better? How do I even get a promotion? What does it mean to be a senior level artist and then move into art director? Because going from a junior artist to a senior artist, most of the time, it is getting better at drawing and painting, and then you're getting better at being a concept artist in general. But then you ask yourself, okay, well, I'm a senior. How do I get to being an art director? Like, what does that mean? Those are the kinds of things that higher level artists are working on, right? And it doesn't mean that they're working on it in like a painting sense. They're not sitting there doing like studies every day and stuff like that. But they start learning, okay, let me learn how to lead this artist. I have a junior that I'm working with, not I'm not saying that right now. I'm just, for example, I have a junior that I'm working with. How do I create a better pitch deck for this artist so he can do better at his job? Because the better he does at his job, the better I do at my job, right? Because I'm his lead, so I need to launch him better, so on and so forth. It's this constant like, it's this constant like back and forth of like learning how to interact with people. Now it's not art skill, it's communication skills that they start working on. Or as an art director, how do I pitch this better? That way, whenever I show my stuff to game directors or, you know, clients or, you know, investors or whoever, they're going to take that and run with it. They actually like it. They're going to put millions of dollars into this project. How do I get better at that? I had this exact question for one of my art directors whenever I first started. Not my first job, but like later on. Sorry about that. I had this exact question, and I asked him. I was like, "Hey, why are you here? You know, like you seem like a very high end artist, and I don't want to say it like this, but it wasn't really a high end studio. You know what I mean?" And what he told me, like he was like, "Oh, you know, so the reason I'm here is because I want to get better at pitching and learning how to communicate with suits, right? Like people like, you know, in money positions and management positions and all those things, right? Because he said, I want to learn it here where it's a little bit easier. And so when I go to AAA studios, I'm a lot better at it and I can do it at a higher level, right? It's kind of like training wheels versus, you know, somewhere else. I'm like, oh shit, because he could draw his ass off, right? He's an amazing draftsman, amazing painter, amazing designer, and he could, if he just stopped giving a shit, he'd probably be okay. You know what I'm saying? Like he wouldn't need to actually physically get better at painting. He'd have a long career. I mean, he's already had a long career, but he'd have a even better career if he just painted, right? But his skill set is growing in other departments. And that's what he was trying to convey to me, is just he's learning how to communicate better. He's learning how to lead better. He's learning how to pitch better. And I was like, oh shit, okay, I get that, right? And then my understanding of his role changed, right? So when you're an artist, when you're first kind of starting, you know, oftentimes it's I suck at drawing and painting, so I need to get better at drawing and painting, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, do that. That's the first step. But eventually, you need to realize that painting and drawing is not going to get you to where you need to go. It got you here. It's not going to get you there, right? Getting a job in the industry as a concept artist, you need to be able to draw, paint, and design. Achieving the highest level of that, you know, like maybe a senior artist within the same job title, is you need to get better at draw, painting, design, and then probably a bit of communication, right? As well, because you're able to hit target better kind of thing, right? But then it shifts because an art director is not the same job. Art director is not an art director because they can draw and paint extremely well. That's not the reason that they're your lead, right? It's something else. And so that's why you see a lot of professionals, they always do like, I'm just doing a quick study. I'm just doing like, you know, I just did like some fan art or did whatever, right? Because it's like whatever, you know, it's like, it's just something to do. And yeah, maybe they're trying to get better at painting or they're trying to figure some stuff out. But more often than not, their real like skill building kind of metric, the thing that they're going for, has nothing to do with drawing and painting, right? Because it's not that they're done learning. It's just that they can let that simmer on the side. The more paintings they'll do, the better they'll get, right? That's just it happens. That's just natural, right? But it's what other skills do I need, right? And this is where talking with people that are higher level than you really does become such an important skill. Just sitting there at Lightbox, we would go to like meetups after the event and stuff like that to go, you know, just hang out and talk to people, right? And I was talking to some of my students, and I was like, they were talking about rates, like, oh, how do I charge a little bit more? How do I, is this enough for this and that, right? They're just like, it's just money, right? It's just like, I want to bump my rate higher. And then I was like, have you ever thought about not giving them an hourly rate? Have you ever thought about hiring somebody? You know what I'm saying? Because after a while, it becomes a different fight. At the beginning, it's always like, I need to charge more. I'm not charging enough. So how do I make it so I'm not only worth $35 an hour? How do I make it so I'm worth $40, $50 an hour, right? Because that's our goal, right? We just want to get paid more, essentially, for the work that we do. But eventually, it's like, I'm getting a lot of work, but now I'm like unable to do it all. So like, how do I hire somebody, right? And that's kind of where, like, for example, like someone at my level starts thinking about things like that. I'm no longer thinking about rates. I can already get, a pretty high rate according to, my skill set. But now it's like, how do I charge for multiple artists? How do I tell them that the whole team is going to be on this? How do I initiate that conversation, right? And those are the questions that, me and my peer group is having. we all grow together, right? Just like bringing it all the way back to what we were talking about in the beginning, not the beginning, but a little earlier, where it's like that friend group that you're taught, that you grow with. The first questions we had was, how do I do perspective, right? How do I do a curvilinear perspective? How do I do color theory? That was our first questions, right? Our questions now, how do I charge for a team of 6? How do I get them to give me $100,000 for this pitch packet? How do I do taxes for a whole team of people? You know what I'm saying? It's those questions. Like it evolved as we went, and that's what that friend group is for, because that friend group is everything, right? And I promise you, for everybody here, find that group. If you don't, it almost makes the career impossible, right? Not saying it's impossible, but like it makes it so it is so difficult. If you can't trust feedback from friends, if you can't ask them questions and, hopefully get some good answers from multiple skill sets, right? From people that are like doing, easier things, right? From like maybe someone like your level, like senior level artist or whatever, to like, hey, as an art director or as like an art department lead, like, what do you do? You know what I mean? Because like, hey, I'm being considered for an art director role or art department lead role. Like, what does that even mean? And you can ask your friend because he or she is that person, maybe at a different studio, but still, and those are the kind of things that we start working on. Sorry, this is a very long tangent-y conversation on that topic, but this is it, man. That's what we do. It's like, yeah, drawing and painting is great, and we do those things for sure, and I work on it all the time, but I'm not trying to get better at painting, right? I will naturally get better at painting just by doing more paintings. Every once in a while I feel like there's a gap in my skill set, so I'm like, okay, let me do some studies, let me kind of address that. But that's not the main focus anymore. I just do that. That's just like, that's back burner stuff, man, But it's just like, how do I become a better concept artist? How do I achieve what other studios other people running studios are doing? Because there's artists out there that are making like millions of dollars as concept artists, right? And in my mind, right, when I first started, I'm like, how's that even possible? If you charge like, because if you do the hourly thing, let's what is it, $1 million a year? What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, there you go. Right? Yeah. $1 million. Divide that by 50 weeks, right? That's $20,000 a week, and you divide that by, what is that, 40? You have to charge $500 an hour, right, to be making $1 million a year, right? And so that's not possible. Maybe not. I don't think it's possible. That's crazy. And then you have to do that for 50 years out of the week, right? Or 50 weeks out of the year, right? And so it gets to this point to where it's like, okay, that's not feasible anymore, but they're still doing it. How is he doing that? You know what I mean? And then you look at it's like, oh, okay, he's running a studio. Oh, okay, he's hiring artists. Oh, okay, he's, doing self. You know what I mean? It's growing from there. They have 10 clients that they're working. He runs a team of people. He does, you know what I mean? And it starts multiplying. And then you start learning those things. You're like, oh shit, that's what's happening there. You know what I'm saying? So it's very like, obviously it's things that I'm still learning now. It's things that I'm still trying to understand myself. But those are the things that I would say most higher level artists are trying to figure out. There are, we're always trying to get better at drawing and painting. That happens regardless. But it no longer becomes a focus because it's not that I don't care. It's just like, I'm doing paintings all day. It's like, I'm gonna get better regardless. You know what I'm saying? Like just naturally. Yeah, as long as you're somebody that wants to improve. If you're somebody that doesn't try to improve, this conversation doesn't make sense to you anyway. But it's just like if you're not trying to improve, you won't get better, right? Cool. Great question. Sorry. Cool. All right. Well, what's up, Christian?
That's cool. That make perfectly sense because I think once you gain enough experience, you want to go in other direction once you know the business more.
Yeah.
Why not to try to do your own thing or open a company?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. I was just curious because one thing, uh, if a person start to focus on that, like open a new studio, uh, think more about the business side.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, does this thing make you unhappy because you lose like the love for art, or after a while become just like any other job, like just because you're working for a client, and basically it's not I'm not saying should be fun because work is work,
Yeah.
but after a while you just don't care. You just think of make more money and fuck the art side.
I mean, I will say this. That feeling sets in way before you start your own studio. You know what I'm saying? I don't say it like that, but like it really like most people, I will say, you get that within 3 years of working. Most people that I know that are in the like third or fourth year of working, you lose that like mysticism of what the art industry is because like whenever you're working, it's always like, you work at a place and then you're like, okay, let's say for example, you got your dream job. This is the place that you've been dying to work at your entire life. You know what I mean? It's like I got to do exactly what I want to do, right? Chances are it's still not what you want to do because let's say for example, you work at a place and they're like, oh hey, this is your dream studio, great, cool. And then they give you an assignment. They're like, hey, can you do the tiles for this room? It's like, oh, but I wanted to do the large environments. That's my dream. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I want to do, right? they're like they're like, yeah, but we have somebody else doing that, and we need this done. So you just do the job, because at the end of the day, yeah, you're at the studio you want to work at, but you're gonna get assignments where it's just like whatever, It's like, hey, can you just do this like this tile crack texture for us? You know what I mean? You're at the studio, you're at the dream place, you're working, you're doing art, but it's still not yours, right? At the end of the
Yeah,
day, I think everyone needs to
makes sense.
realize. I think something I had to realize too, where it's like, At the best case scenario, it's still not your project. You know, you're still a hired hand for somebody else's dream, right? Somebody else's desire. The director, the showrunner, whoever. This is their project, not yours. And so there's this feeling that happens where you kind of start being like, oh, I guess I guess like no matter where I go, it's not really what I want to do because you're the hired hand. You're just the plumber. It's not your house. You know what I mean? You're like, oh yeah, I'm told to do this job, and it's like I think you should do it this way. It's like, yeah, but they're paying. They're the ones that put the money out there, right? And so you start learning that, and you start realizing that it's like, oh, I guess not. I can't do, or I'm not. Not every the job isn't something that's gonna fulfill my every desire. It's just a job. It just pays you. And you learn that pretty quick. And that's like if you actually got to your dream studio. Because for me, for example, I started in games, but I wanted to go to animation. So in my mind, I was like, I was all hyping up animation. I was like, once I get there, it's exactly what I want. It's exactly what I need, right? And then once I actually got to animation, I was like, oh yeah, it's just whatever they want because they're paying for it. You know what I mean? It's their job. It's their money. And then you start realizing, oh, maybe I don't need to work at a place to do what I want to do. If you want to create art, if you want to create concepts, you have to do this. You have to set aside time on a random night, right? 8, 9, 10 o'clock p.m., whatever time it is for you guys, and be painting robot sushi chefs, right? Because they're not going to pay you for this shit, right? And that's what it is. And if you turn that into something, that's on you. If you want to make your own project, you want to make your own game, you have to do that. And I think a lot of people realize that within their first couple years of working, hopefully, because more often than not, the concept art industry, it's not meant for people that want to do their own thing. Not at the beginning, because you're going to be doing something else, someone else's thing for the first bit. And then once you get enough skill, right, you change that, and you're like, cool, I'm going to start my own indie project. I'm going to start my own short. And hopefully everyone that wants to do that gets there. I truly do feel that everyone should like work on their own project like that. But that's what it is. You just have to understand that no matter what you're doing, it's still a job, and they're just you're just getting paid to do a service essentially. And you got to be okay with that. As for opening a studio and stuff, that's a whole thing. If you're somebody that likes painting and likes for me, I do enjoy the act of painting quite a lot, actually. Like just rendering and stuff, I really do enjoy that. And so for me, being an art director or something might not be in my desire, right? Because when we all start, I even said it too, I want to get the highest job position I can. Generally speaking, that's production designer, right? That's kind of like that's what a lot of people think, right? I mean, as a concept artist or as a biz dev artist, within the same ladder, the higher you go, generally speaking, that's production designer, right? For like storyboard artists, that's like a director, for example. Like it's a different job, but it's the same pillar essentially. The top of us, generally speaking, is a production designer / creative director, right? It's kind of you don't have to stay there or anything, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, so I was like, I want to climb the ladder and get to where I need to go. And then the more I do it, the more I'm like, actually, I don't think I want to do that. Not at the very least, not for a studio, right? Not for somebody else. Because I think for me, I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if I like that responsibility. You get paid more, for sure. You get paid way more, almost double. For, as an average, right? You almost get paid double what your concept artists make as an art director. But the responsibility is on you, right? You have to make that project go through. You have to do all these things. You're the one that takes responsibility when the artist, kind of mess up. It's your fault when when something goes wrong, it's their fault when something goes right. You know, if the project goes well and the art looks good, congratulations, artist. You know, congratulations, Kenny. You killed it. But then when the project goes bad, the image goes bad, it's the art director's fault, right? So you get all the fault, but none of the credit, right? And, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or anything. I'm not saying they don't get credit. They very much do. But it's a lot of responsibility. And you have to understand that, you know, you will be painting less in that scenario. If you're okay with that, I'm sure it's a great job. I've never done it for a big studio or anything. I have art directed for sure, but in terms of like for a real project, for like a production, right? No, I haven't, because I see my art directors. I'm like, God damn that. I'm not saying that it sucks, but I'm like, that's a lot of work. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just here to paint. You know, so you really have to understand that about yourself. I think a lot of people kind of get into this thinking that, oh, you know, because it's the highest prestige and the biggest name plaque, I'm gonna try and get it. But it's a personality thing too. You have to be the kind of person that wants that likes that, and is okay with not painting as much, because we get into this job because we like creating. And the higher you go, the less you're creating. It's still your vision, right? You're the one that, you know, puts it out there to like, you know, the vision, the board, the launch, the designs. That's your thought process. It's somebody else's work. Your brain, their hand, right? And you know, you just have to kind of figure out where you want to be in that scenario. You know, none of it's wrong, none of it's right. You know, it's just what works for you. But I think a lot of students just don't understand that right off the bat, because, you know, why would you? You know, it's not something you have experience with, so it's like it can be very hard to understand that sometimes. You know. Sorry, that was very ranty and long-winded. It's spicy today, guys. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's I don't know. These conversations for me, I feel like they do the most, just because we can kind of really understand because every student, everybody here, generally speaking, you're mostly students. I'm not saying not saying none of you work, but like, you know, some of you actually do work, but you tend to be in the earlier kind of points in your career, and these are the kind of things that you want to think about as you're growing. The same questions that you had before is not the same questions you should be asking now, right? Because you've already asked that question. You already know how to get better at design. You know, you're always getting better. You need to improve, but it's, you know, it's not really as important anymore, because, you know, you're just going at this point. You know, you're just cooking. You know, you're just going. You can put that on the side burner. What other questions can you ask to get you to that higher level? Because no one's going to teach you those things, right? When you get into the workforce, when you start working at your studio, they hired you to do a job, right? It's like, hey, you're a viz dev artist, you're a concept artist, or whatever, right? And I'm hiring you to do this. I'm not training you to be an art director. Sometimes they will. I'm not saying they don't, but what I am saying is there's no expectation to do that. Some places will, because they're good like that, but a lot of places won't, because there's no obligation to do so. It's out of the kindness of their heart that they decided to say, hey, I think, you know, Kenny can learn how to be an art director, because we want to teach him how to do that, essentially, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It happens, but it's not the expectation, and you just have to be aware of that. And so as you progress as an artist, remember, you don't have a teacher anymore. You know, you have to be the person that's actively seeking these new skills. One of the bigger things that I've seen, one of the bigger problems that I see pop up a lot, is that when you're a student, it's always like, you know, it's everyone's always telling you what to learn next, right? Because you have teachers, you have people like, you know, kind of above you, generally speaking, skill-wise, and people around you to help, you know, get you into that better understanding of what you should and should not be doing, right? You know what I'm saying? And so with that, once you start working, you need to figure out what that next step is, because you no longer have the teacher to be like, hey, work on this thing, think about that thing. You have to actively find it, and that's why that's what that friend group's about. I'll get a message every once in a while. Hey man, what do you think about this? Hey, how'd you land that bigger contract? How'd you land that bigger rate? And it's things like that where you're like, I just talked to John, or I just talked to whoever, and they'll help you out. It's those, it's that friend group that you're looking for, So make friends. I know as artists we're lacking in the friend department, but that's the one thing that we need to be good at, because that's what it makes your career a lot smoother, All right, I think we are good for today. So a couple news things, actually. Well, before we do that, let's show you where I got. So as you can see, your boy has been rendering for a little while now, and you see how much more complicated this thing got. It's just like all the little things, things that I didn't model out, because for one, it doesn't really matter, right? It's just a lot of small stuff, but like just increasing the design in there, making those materials look better. Actually paint shit. Like, don't just leave it because 3D looks good. Generally speaking, it doesn't. Now you can actually see this and you're like, oh, okay, I see the difference between that guy and then the guy next to him and then the countertop around him. There's this difference to it, and you want to keep improving that rendering skill. But if you trust the 3D too much, it'll lead you astray like that, right? It feels done because everything else around it is the same quality, but you should know that is not how you want to keep things, right? For today, for everyone following along, right, start rendering at your focal points, right? There's a ton to do here. It took me 2.5 hours at this point to get to. I stayed right here, right? Like I didn't go anywhere except for here. I did this part earlier before the stream, but like that took me 2.5 hours. So, obviously everything else around it isn't going to take me as long because the detail falls off as you go away. But, start in those focal points, put as much time as you can, because once you run out of time, at least the part we're looking at is finished. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I did. That's where I'm going to keep going. And I'll show you kind of where I end up next week. I probably won't finish this this week. I'll probably just keep going during next week's stream as well. But this is kind of where I'm going. This is why I'm doing it. This is how I went about it, right? With that in mind, a couple news things. So first things first, to next week is going to be the last stream of the year, right? So we're done for 2024. But also, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break for 2025. I've been getting actually a little bit too busy, so I need to take some time to kind of figure out some stuff on my end for like work and all these things. So I'm unable to kind of continue doing this into the earlier part of the year. I do want to pick it back up again. I'm not 100% sure when I will. Join the Discord, be part of that. I'm gonna kind of be popping in and out a little bit more for like hangouts and stuff like that. And for everybody here and everybody listening, make your own hangouts. You don't have to show up when someone else is hanging out. Just call some friends. And for those that show up and like you're kind of hoping people show up, just tell people, hey, just call a friend, be like, hey, you want to hang out here in the chat? And then just leave the door open for people to come in. That's really what it's all about. Show up, make an event. There's multiple places that you can do chats in this Discord. It doesn't have to be this Discord. Do it in your own Discord. Do it in a different Discord. Just at least do it. That's all I care about. Be around, make connections, talk to people, make friends, right? That's how we get to where we're going. But I'm going to be around more. I'm going to be hanging out in the Discords. Hopefully when people are around too. I can't promise I'll show up every week, but I'm going to be active in there. That way we can still talk, still do things like this, but just in a little less formal of a setting, right? But yeah, I do have some plans coming up for this coming year. I got some things kind of in the works. I'll announce that when all that stuff happens. I do want to come back and keep streaming and keep doing videos like this and stuff like that. just for now. Things are getting a little bit too busy for me, and I need to kind of balance things a little bit better. So with that in mind, next week is going to be the last stream for a little while. It's going to be more of the same, more of like kind of just rendering, but a little more like kind of talking about some other stuff. I do have some plans. I do have some topics I do want to talk about before we kind of dip out. But yeah, show up, bring some like, topics you want to talk about, anything, right? You know how this works. It really does kind of make the conversation so much deeper and so much more impactful. You never really know what questions you have that's really gonna change someone's career prospects, just because you asked something. Same if you've benefited from a question here, right? Ask one yourself. I'm sure somebody else will benefit as well, right? But yeah, so this is what we got this week. I'm gonna keep going throughout the week and then hopefully get to something presentable at the end of the day. But yeah, until then, that's all I got for you this week, guys. I'll see you next week. And yeah, cool. Later.
Okay, Kenny, thank you so much.